Welcome to Intersections. I'm joined today by Heidi Adams. Hi, Heidi.
Hi, Derek.
Heidi, I've known you since your birth. And so watching you grow up has been a pleasure for me because I've watched you through many phases of your life. One thing I do know is that St. John's Citadel has always been a major factor in your life. Can you tell us a little bit about those years growing up here at the Citadel?
Sure. So I came to the Citadel when I was probably about 2 years old. That's because my oldest brother is deaf. So we came here because of the deaf interpreting services. That's kind of why we ended up here. But basically, this has been my home since that time. So I grew up doing all the activities that were offered, basically. And some people don't realize, but in being part of the Salvation Army, that means you get free music lessons, which was really important for me all the way up through. Really good quality, free music lessons. That was very engaging. And then, of course, a lot of people who invested in me, prayed for me, guided me, and helped me from, little all the way up through. And so, no matter where I go, I really view this place, and of course I spent a lot of time in the building. We would be here 3, 4, 5 times a week at some points. However, it's really not about a building. It's about people. A church is people, and the people who are here have made a huge impact on my life and invested a lot in me, and so I'm very grateful for St. John's Citadel.
Great. So when you graduated from Memorial with a Bachelor of Music,
Yep.
You headed off to do something a little different than that. You brought together your music background, I'm sure, as well as all of that investment of St. John's Citadel that you just referenced, and you headed off to Triton. Can you tell us what you did in Triton?
Sure. So I guess I should preface in saying that I applied for the position of youth pastor in Triton as a joke. I thought it was funny. I knew Kristen and Leslie Sims. They were really the main people I knew from Triton. And I didn't even know where, geographically it was located. But I was graduating university and I was sort of pursuing other things. I did not want to go to Triton, but I applied as a joke, and then it's like a snowball effect. I ended up going there. And I spent 4 really important years in Triton, important for me, very formative. So I was, I guess for the first time, not really the first time, but the first major responsible leadership role that I had to take on. There was a lot of challenges and conflicts and things that I really hadn't had to wrestle with before that time. So, however, I do feel that the whole reason I was able to do any of that was because of the training that I had here. So I got to Triton and they said, okay, you're preaching, you're preaching next Sunday. And I had never preached before. And then another week, okay, so you've got to put together the Christmas drama with the children. Well, I had never done that, but being here, of course, I had gotten a lot of exposure and participation and stuff like that. But it was just that first year I just described as surviving the next episode of something I hadn't done before.
So those were 4 really important years for you. And through all that time, and maybe before that, there had always been this notion, I think, within you of ministry, and whatever this means, overseas ministry. Can you tell us how that kind of evolved in you, and when you knew that was something you really needed to do?
Yeah. So when I was a small girl, and I don't remember how old I was, but we had an open Sunday school meeting. I think Bernice Langdon was the Sunday school sergeant at the time, and Dr. Donhouse was the guest. And all I remember of that experience is being fascinated by her. Of course, she went to Africa in 1987, the year I was born. And I remember she had her slides. So of course we had the projector and the transparencies.
Right.
And I remember a transparency of a dirt field with a peacock. That's all I can tell you. However, the following week, I remember telling my mom, you know, I'm going to be like Dr. Don House someday. But as time went on, actually, when I went to Triton, this is interesting because I was trying to go overseas and nothing was working out. And so I ended up staying in Triton for 4 years. And in that 4 years, 5 of my family members passed away. Some, so 3 of my grandparents, an uncle suddenly, and a cousin. So that was very, it made it really obvious God's timing and plan, because I needed those 4 years to be in Newfoundland with my family, and also I needed the experience, you know, very badly as well. So after that, I went to Vancouver.
Right, to the War College?
Yes.
Right.
So because I did feel that, well, I had wanted to go there since its inception, really. I had heard about it.
Could you just give a definition? What was the War College,
Yeah.
for those who don't know?
Sure. So the War College was a 1 year of training, I would say, in the downtown east side of Vancouver, which is the poorest neighborhood of Canada. And so 85% of the population is in active addiction. And so you're facing a lot of issues like homelessness and substance abuse, mental health.
Right.
All that stuff, which really I had never been exposed to. I didn't know what marijuana smelled like. Maybe that's, I'm thankful for my Salvation Army upbringing. And so it's very sheltered, and I felt that I really needed to see that stuff and get exposed to that stuff. And so we lived in what was called an SRO, so like an apartment building that was basically condemnable, and it was condemned a few years after I left. And so everyone in the building that we lived with is in active substance abuse. And then we had our, we had some Bible training and different classes. We had to do volunteer work at, say, the Harbor Light and different community groups. And we did a lot of spiritual formation, Bible study, prayer, all different kinds of things they exposed us to in that way. And then you're just walking around the neighborhood you're just allowing God to lead you to learn from the pain and heartache of the people you're surrounded by and learn about what God's love means. So that was also a big year for me, you know, in terms of new experiences. And so at that point, Derek, I had 5 years of ministry in Canada. And I had gotten to know myself a lot better than when I left MUN. And one thing I knew about myself was that I have to be able to talk to people. That's how I do ministry. That's how I share my faith. Is, you know, way back when I was a very shy person, but that's all melted away. That doesn't exist anymore. And so I talk to people, spend time with people. So I felt if I can't learn another language, I should stay in Canada. That was basically my feelings at that time, was I would be better served to stay home or, you know, in Canada and continue in some kind of ministry here. And so I was once again applying to go to a lot of places, none of which was working out in terms of visa. And specifically, of course, I wanted to go somewhere with the Salvation Army, but there aren't really sometimes good channels to volunteer with the Salvation Army, internationally speaking. And however, in Triton, I had met a lady named Avis Rideout, who started a children's home in Thailand. And I thought, well, I'll just get in contact with Avis. I really didn't want to go to Asia. I had visited my brother in Korea, and I was afraid of a hot tropical climate because I'm a cold. I like the snow. I like cold. But I applied, and it was once again sort of like the Triton thing. I've never had to be curious of where God wants me to go or what God wants me to do, because it's always been very clear and obvious that everything I'm planning doesn't work out, and then another door opens and everything is so easy. So that's how I ended up going to Thailand for 7 months at that time. Just as, in my opinion at that time, it was just an exposure trip. It was just to see if I could integrate into another culture and learn another language. But I got sucked in. I fell in love with some people, and not only that, once again it's God's planning. So I was applying to work for the Salvation Army in another place, and I arrived in Thailand, and 3 months before my feet touched the ground there, 2 Salvation Army officers, their names are Major Ken and Major Neva, and they arrived 3 months before I did to start the Salvation Army in Thailand.
Okay.
And they had nobody, nothing. And so in 7 months, I did become conversational in the Thai language. I did integrate well with people, and then I fell in love with a few people that just really touched my heart. And the Salvation Army needed somebody in Thailand. So it's just obvious, right? There's no mystery, really, in following God's will in my life.
So let's talk about God's will in your life. I mean, when did that become something that you were keenly aware of, that God was working on you? And so you had an intersection of life and faith.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
So I had my first spiritual crisis, I would say, when I was about 7 years old, maybe. And it was a playground incident where I had a friend, one of my best friends at the time, who got in a fight with everybody on the playground and left in a fury. And I, of course, I have a little bit of codependency. Sometimes I think I'm the savior of the world. And so I decided to stage an intervention. I called everyone on the playground together, and I explained why they should have empathy and compassion for my friend and re-accept her on the playground.
And you're 7, right?
Yeah, 7. Yeah, around 7. And I, in advocating for her, I basically shared some of her story. And I'm not going to get into that here, but it was to elicit compassion from the playground people. And when she came back, as she approached the playground, I ran to her with joy and said, "Everybody's forgiven you, and I told them XYZ about your past." And as I said that, I realized I had made a grave mistake. And then the expression on her face, and then she turned around and ran away. So the reason this was a spiritual crisis for me was because obviously I had done many things wrong before that, but they had been intentional. And this was the first time where I had tried to do the right thing and ended up doing the wrong thing. And so I had a distinct sort of gloom that I remember thinking, like, okay, and doing some calculations. I'm 7 years old. When I try to do the right thing, I do the wrong thing. How am I going to make it to like 77? Like, I'm just not going to get into heaven. Like, I really thought, well, that's it for me. What's even the point? I am obviously hugely flawed, and I am not going to make it through another 70 years. Even when I try to do the right thing, I do the wrong thing. And I started crying in bed, and my sister said, of course, I have a twin sister. She was in the bed, actually, and that friend we had made up, and she was sleeping over. So she was in bed with my sister, and I was in my bed, and she said, Dad, Heidi's crying. You know, so Dad took me, and we sat down, and I, you know,
Spill the beans.
yeah, and I'm getting emotional just because my dad, right? He's unimportant, you know.
Yes, he is.
I knew I wasn't gonna hold on to everything here today. So anyways, he explained to me what salvation is,
Okay.
you know, and grace and forgiveness. And that's when I was saved.
Wonderful.
So, at that time I was 7 years old. It was really easy to have faith.
Right.
You believe anything when you're 7, right?
Yes.
So, while that was really important at that moment, there's been 1,000 other things that happened since then that have, I guess, confirmed that I need that faith in my life. And as you know, I've continued to try to do the right thing and done the wrong thing.
We all have.
Yeah.
So the question for you now, as we get close to wrapping this up
Yeah.
for this morning, is how does that translate after all that experience and time and
Yeah.
geography and
Yeah.
all of that? How does that now translate to, you know, March 12th, 2022,
Yeah.
when you got up this morning and how does faith play a conscious role in your daily living?
Yeah. So I would say that my faith is everything. It only becomes more important for me. And it's like a breathing. And I guess my faith, maybe my relationship with God doesn't necessarily look the way you would think some holy person, you know, meditating and contemplating. It doesn't look like that for me. And I have just come from a year of a lot of crises, the biggest challenges I've ever faced. And so for me, right now, my faith, it's a lot of arguing. It's a lot of wrestling. It's a lot of like, why is the world this way? And
Right.
why is this allowed to happen? And,
Right.
you know, how come, you know, we did this together and it didn't really, you know, things didn't get better, or this, you know, there's a lot of questions. But that doesn't mean, the only reason I can ask those questions confidently is because of the presence of God in my life gives me so much security and confidence to be able to do that. You know, in my day-to-day life, I would say I have very little fear. And I'm alone, mostly, in terms of I'm a single woman, and I've gone many places, and places like the downtown east side of Vancouver, or, you know, the other side of the world that would definitely make other people nervous, but I'm never afraid, and that's because I feel God with me. I don't necessarily think that something bad is not going to happen to me or anything like that, but I always feel a tangible presence with me, and I think that having also God with me always, I don't have the loneliness that I thought I might have. You know, I grew up with a twin sister, so I really was never lonely until we parted ways, and I had a fear about that, but I've never felt alone. I always feel Jesus with me, and I think it also gives me confidence each day that no matter what is coming, you know, a mentor and another important person of mine is Dave Ivany, and he says all will be well. Every time And he's the guy I go to when I need somebody.
Right.
And he always says, all will be well.
All will be well.
And that's about faith. And it's not well, it might not be well in this moment.
No.
And it might not be well for this person or this people group or this country or, but that's what faith is, that someday all will be well. So you have a certain confidence and reassurance, no matter what is coming at you, that it's going to be okay.
Well, on that note, that's a positive note. It's going
Yeah.
to be okay. I want to say thank you for joining us on Intersections and sharing your story. And wherever it is the will of God takes you, you know He's going to go with you. And so does St. John's Citadel always go with you. So thanks again, Heidi. It's been wonderful to chat.
Thanks, Derek, for having me.